There's
Yeah,
this
like
other story of how the right came up, and it has these data points that you started with, like Reddit, and it has Gamergate, and it has this other story that has nothing to do with Bannon's time at Goldman Sachs, Bannon's time at Harvard
And
Business School. It's a different
yeah,
story,
the
and it's a
Claremont Institute. Yeah.
the
yeah.
Claremont Institute, right? And, the Trilateral Commission. It
Right.
doesn't have to do with the data points of old conspiracy theories. It has to do with a different set of contingencies. And it takes a documentary rather than a, board with red string to explain that as a narrative. Hello and welcome to What Rough Beast. I'm Virginia Heffernan. With me is Cy Cantarell, not just as a guest today, she is my co-host. Cy, I'm so glad you're joining as really truly part of our What Rough Beast team.
I am so excited, Virginia. This is like one of my dreams to be a part of an ongoing project that really takes a critical look at where we are and, of course, where we could be.
Yes,
So,
I
yeah.
really am excited. Your emphasis on the what can be built from the rubble is really exciting to me because the shambles are all around us right now.
We are in the omni shambles.
We're in the we're in the omni shambles. Maybe we're from polycrisis to omni shambles.
From
I like
polycrisis to omni shambles.
right, the Cy and Virginia story. Um,
Right?
but it does feel like it's like the demolition is sort of done or almost done. Of so many sectors, fields, cultures, microcultures, everywhere you go, mostly outside of mainstream media, but every podcast you listen to is delving into a new part of how we got to a place where we have cities occupied by the federal government. You have crypto and AI taking the place of traditional finance, and that following all financialization of all different sectors, this abstract thing. What could possibly have gone wrong with gender relations such that you have a group of men in the Epstein files who dominate the bodies of children? That this is a patriarchy expanded beyond
What we usually
radioactive.
recognize. Yeah.
That's right, exactly. And that's, yeah, what we would even usually recognize. And it takes all of us, it takes the Christians online deconstructing to tell us how they got where they got and how they ended up voting for Trump, though it was against their interests and their values. And how people at the law firms, your colleague Rachel Cohen, who like left Skadden Arps when they capitulated to Trump. What am I doing with my career such that I'm part of this? The people who left the Washington Post. Did I really want to be working for Jeff Bezos? What happened to my idealism? And I love seeing that. I love it. And I know
And
you've
all the
had,
people who are getting laid off from or leaving all of these large tech companies, which were supposed to be the ultimate job that anybody of my generation that we could wish for, right? It was the
that's
only
it.
thing that was going to offer us security.
Right.
And I think you're seeing that those fictions start to completely unravel and for people to be sort of jettisoned outside of any kind of story that they recognize, and like,
Yeah.
how are we going to make meaning in this widening gyre, to
Ye-
refer back to the
yes.
title of the show?
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah. You're a Yates fan too, and just
Hmm.
your amazing background in all these fields. I have to bring up that you are an extraordinary perfumer under the name Holiday Salts, which is one of the things that attracted me to your work, and also that you are a feral scholar who works outside the bounds with this background in the arts. This is the kind of lens and intelligence it's going to take right now to make meaning of a world that is like in shambles. So you just keeping your eye on them. You do a wonderful job in your videos explaining, really complex relationships between things like the bond markets and,
Everyone's
and
favorite topic.
everyone's favorite topic that you managed to make interesting. So I'm thrilled that you're going to be talking to people and guests, and we'll be talking to each other about this and talking to commenters and listeners about your ideas of how to remake the world, because it is ours to remake.
It is
Um,
indeed.
Now, this is the first guest you've recruited today is Giorgio Angelini. I didn't know anything about him, but maybe introduce him before he comes on with us.
So Giorgio Angelini is somebody that I met actually through some of the posts that I did around disaffected young men and underground internet culture. And he is the producer and director of several films. But for this specific episode, we wanted to talk to him about his two films, Feels Good Man from 2020 and The Antisocial Network from 2024. These two films are kind of like, felt like bookends to me. I saw them pretty close to one another because I started with The Antisocial Network, although Feels Good Man came out beforehand. Feels Good Man follows the cartoonist Matt Fury, who created the character of Pepe the Frog, who those of us who have been on the internet a lot in recent years are probably familiar with and seeing as this kind of meme that was gradually transformed from like a viral sort of cartoon character that showed up in Tumblr to an actual alt-right symbol, an extremist symbol, and was eventually designated as a hate symbol. And so the
Mhm.
documentary tracks Matt Fury's shock and his despair. And as he kind of realizes that this character is completely lost from his ability to affect the outcome of it, and then and his trying to grab it back for himself. And so that's the sort of the arc of a single idea and a single symbol. And then the Antisocial Network is about the platforms that led to the rise of massive conspiracies like QAnon and Pizzagate and their effect on the January 6th insurrection in the US.
Mhm.
And so that is more from the lens of the systemic platform technical movements, including hackers from Anonymous and everything that had to do with how Trump and January 6th, how the rise of those different movements occurred. And so we're going to be talking to him about the people, the places, the ideas that he saw and interacted with as a part of making these documentaries and what kind of meaning he sees evolving now that we're in the second Trump administration and
Yeah.
in the middle of even more disintegration than we arguably even had in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. He's the perfect guest for this. I'm so glad you found him. Let's talk to him. Giorgio, welcome to What Rough Beast.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. I haven't been on a podcast in a while, so
Oh, good. Well, I'm sure
let's
you
shake it out.
will be able to improv it together. So on What Rough Beast, we started before the inauguration this time, and we decided that the show would bear witness to America's demise. We thought there was no way around thinking that we were in a period of demise, no longer rising autocracy, but American demise. At the same time, we've come after a year to the second half of the mandate for the show, which is to try to imagine what can be built from the rubble. So if you accept that some version of the internet is in shambles, the hopes for the internet are in shambles, and the other things you've made documentaries about, maybe you can help us imagine what can be built. Um,
I I love it. I actually have
yeah.
always of the many projects I spin in the back of my mind that will never get done. One of them was a podcast idea called Tabula Rasa about like
Oh,
tearing everything
perfect.
down,
Yeah.
like going
Yes.
industry by industry. Like, what would you do if you could start fresh? But so
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
I'm
I
happy to
think
put that into the world. I'm never going to actually do it. So if someone
I
wants to
think
do
we're getting a little.
it,
I think we're getting a little push from the Epstein files. It looks like finance. It looks like foreign policy is in trouble. It looks like gender relations are in trouble. So I think we've got a pretty good tabla rasa.
yeah, I think it's working in kind of unexpected ways. Like there's this, I was talking about it with a friend last night. There's just sort of strange connection between AI and the pressures it's putting on culture, uh, and the economy and the Epstein files. And of course, there are like literal connections between, and relationships and investors and whatnot. But like the way that they both expose uh, something I think most Americans always understood, but didn't understand the depth. But just the fix is in, like this idea that um, the entire economy and structure has kind of been built for those at the top at the expense of everyone else, and AI like really puts that into sharper focus, I think.
Yeah, I think that's
And
right.
then, yeah.
I'm going to let Sai ask some questions because we've got so many questions about how you managed to make these two documentaries, Feels Good Man and The Antisocial Network.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of a frame around it for our listeners, but so, Giorgio's 2 documentaries that sort of feel like bookends to me a little bit are Feels Good Man, which was 2020,
Yeah, that's when it came
and
out, yeah.
then The Antisocial Network, which is 2024.
Correct, yeah,
And so these for Feels Good Man is about Matt Fury, who is a, animator and, I guess he would call himself a cartoonist too, graphic
yeah.
novelist who created the Pepe the Frog character, and it's sort of about how he got swept up in the whole alt-right creation of Pepe and Pepe's then sort of elevation or, degradation to a hate symbol, and how he tried to recapture it from the alt-right and then eventually just sort of had to go with it, I guess, and sort of was able to bring
And then
Pepe
he
back into the
murdered
mainstream.
Pepe.
And
He
then he
murdered
murdered
Pepe.
Pepe. Yeah. It's like, but it's his individual arc, but it's also about the alt-right movement and how the alt-right appropriates different symbols in order to create these different narratives, memes. And then the Antisocial Network is about how the different platforms involved in that same movement sort of led to structurally the narratives that came out to create a wave of support for initial Trump campaign, the issues that we saw during the pandemic, and then of course Pizzagate and QAnon, and how that went on to fuel a lot of the things that we're starting to see today. And that's where we kind of leave off, and where I'd love, your thoughts about this current moment, the second year of the second Trump administration. But just to rewind a bit, um, how did you come to this topic, this subject matter? Because it's very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually started in a place that maybe seems very unrelated, but I think in hindsight was quite related. But I have a background in architecture.
Mm,
And so when I was getting my master's, I ended up getting, long story short, a travel grant to go photograph this abandoned McMansion development during the housing crisis, the last one. Um, and that ended up turning into my first documentary, which was called Owned, A Tale of Two Americas, which was about
mm,
how post-war housing policy kind of divided America along racial lines using essentially free mortgages doled out to certain people at the expense of others. And I met through friends there an animator and cartoonist named Arthur Jones who helped me with all my motion graphics, and we hit it off. And it was my first doc, so I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and only have a slightly better idea now. But yeah, just, how things naturally go, especially in independent film. We got along really well. And then he was really good friends with, or had just become friends with, Matt Fury. And so when we finished Owned, he asked me if I wanted to help him with Feels Good Man. And his first question was like, have you ever heard of Pepe the Frog? And I was like, yes, I'm quite aware. I had like spent a lot of time on Reddit at that time, and had actually just had recently kind of logged off Reddit and just
mm.
had recognized, this was like 2015 maybe, just kind of recognized the toll it was taking on me. And I wasn't like a super user by any means, but I it felt like it was this moment during Gamergate where all of a
Mm.
sudden I was like, wait, where am I? Like I had
Yeah.
been on Reddit from the beginning and it was fun. And I was like, part of all these groups that felt like the ideal of what the internet was supposed to be. Like we're building these online relationships with people. And I was like, oh, this is cool and fun, and getting new ideas and seeing new content and learning new things. And then all of a sudden Gamergate happens, and I wasn't really in the gaming world necessarily. And it just felt like the rug got pulled out from under me. I was like, I do not
Mm.
want any part of this. I would be in conversations with people, and just like the vitriol that all of a sudden consumed the website just felt like, yeah, the energy was bad. And so anyway, that's kind of where
So
my awareness of Pepe came.
the Gamergate sort of vitriol like spilled over into the subs that you were part of, even though they were not gaming subs?
Yeah, like I remember specifically there was like conversations about Louis CK, for example, and like
Oh, right.
I had kind of, and this is the weird thing, I don't know, as an architect, I often think about these virtual spaces. I kind of envision them physically, like what does this look and
Yeah.
feel like? Before this, it felt like I kind of knew who the users were. And then all of a sudden, that was like the topic in which I started getting this like real vitriolic response from people. And I'd be like, what I would think is a kind of reasonable response to what was happening to Louis C.K. at that time, who I was a big fan of. It'd be like, you fucking normie, like, you're simping for femmes and whatever. And I was like, whoa, it just,
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe I really was a normie and just had been an interloper the whole time and didn't realize it. But just feeling that anger and rage, I guess I take it back. I was involved in video gaming in that I had done I'd worked on a score for a rather large video game at that time called Red Dead Redemption. So that was another space in which I was like fun to talk about the game and interact with people. Then all of a sudden that board just became like verboten, like just disgusting. So yeah.
Wait, when you say Louis C.K., that you mean around the Me Too time? It's a
Yeah,
little
maybe I'm like
different, or
conflating times, or
I think
I mean
that
that
his scandal kind of preceded Me Too a little bit,
a
if I
little bit,
remember
yeah.
right. Like a little bit, like maybe by a year or something
Yeah, it
like
but
that.
wasn't it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It seems
So go
worth
ahead.
talking that there are these characters, even in 4chan, which, by the way, I kept remembering the Antisocial Network as about QAnon.
Hmm.
But the fact that the characters both live in the Me Too crisis and in Gamergate, this makes sense. It's everything all the time, right? And like when pizza's coming up in the Epstein emails right now, I
Right.
just
Yeah.
am like, oh, for God's sakes, like, just right. It's such a bad buzz. All of it. It's just so heavy and depressing. So I see why you got off Reddit. But then what took you
Yeah.
to Pepe?
So my relationship with Arthur, it just happened that he had just started working on this doc about Matt Fury and about Pepe. And so he asked me if I could help him. We enjoyed working together, and I basically moved to Los Angeles to focus on the film. And yeah, it was an incredible experience and took us to some very dark corners of the country too. It is about Matt, but we spend a lot of time with a couple of, I would call them incels, and they would call
Neat.
themselves that. But yeah, in the basements, and I still have the olfactory nasal memory that will
Memory.
never depart. I just sort of say that because, not to bounce all over the place, but to your point about like the things that are cyclical and always come back, like I was listening last night to a podcast with this clavicular guy
Yeah.
Oh
who was
yeah.
like once again co-opted, not Pepe, but co-opted inceldom. And he's like
Yeah.
a handsome dude. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on? I mean, this is just the internet and click culture. It just, and
The
really
Turn by
right.
Ouroboros
turn.
of the internet eating
Oh yeah.
itself all of the time.
All the
Yeah.
time, all the time. So anyway,
And how
yeah.
did you go about even finding, and when I said NEAT just now, for those
Yeah.
of you who may not know
Yes.
the acronym, it is NEET, or not in education,
Employment
employment or
Employment.
training.
training.
And so this is like another way of self-labeling for the subculture to essentially,
So
indicate that they are
not in college, unemployed,
right.
and not
Yeah.
doing any kind of job training. So
Correct. Yeah.
and initially a kind of self-effacing or self-hating way of
Self-deprecating.
identifying, self-deprecating, which does remind me of the original idea of Pepe, which is like
Sure.
slagging oneself off. It makes me think of like Pavement, the band,
Totally.
and Gen X, right? And even like Slackers and early, right, which is just like, yeah, slackers, exactly. Like, I'm not doing
Like
anything.
the whole Richard Linklater, like, I mean, that movie itself, Slacker,
right.
is,
And just to get a little too deep into the meat
Please.
thing, I mean, I'm sure you all know, but there also was Elite, which I think predated
Hacker,
it. From which is like short for elite and was often spelled L33T back in the day, right? So like the thing you're not is elite if you're a meat. And that seems also very Gen X. And also very
elite.
Right. And also Giorgio, very consistent with the original Pepe and the Pepe among the four characters.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of the meme, right? He represented something of the kind of first wave of the internet that felt authentic, that like this was a safe space for cultural rejects to come and have their own safe space, ironically, to be dorks and nerd out. And like Pepe started off as a kind of lovable icon of this movement and really wasn't really imbued with any negative connotations until much later. But all of this is happening without Matt Fury's knowledge whatsoever, that the creator, because Pepe really lived initially in indie comic physical world. And it was in this moment of the early internet that people start, creating memes before the term really even existed. And for whatever reason, Pepe gets scanned and uploaded to the internet. And just like any good cartoon character,
Mhm.
there's just something mysterious and unmistakable, but also inexplicable of like why people react to it. And they're like, that's our mascot. When you look at what's so powerful about following Pepe as an icon, is that you can also follow his image, and it's morphing as a kind of analog for what's happening online. And so it's been very interesting and sad, and it's funny to see just sort of, it's almost like a stock ticker. It's like, where is
Right.
Pepe living right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and well, they turned it into a crypto coin too.
course,
So
yeah.
Oh, right.
it's also
But
literally true.
Multiple.
But
Yeah.
just so we can, I can't leave anything on a downbeat. But so I want to foretell also the use of it in ICE protests.
Yes.
The costumes that make it
Yes.
subversive again, and I'm sure Matt would be excited. I'm sure he is excited somewhat to see it at least used as an anti-authoritarian symbol.
I mean, for sure, when I saw people dressing up in the frog costume things, the
Costumes,
inflatable, yeah. I mean, there's a moment at the end of Feels Good Man that is one of these things that happens, thankfully, in every doc I've made so far, where like the doc gods bestow upon you this like completely unexpected event that really changes the trajectory of the film. And in making Feels Good Man, that happened literally like maybe 2 weeks before we were supposed to deliver the film to submit to Sundance. This protest started happening in Hong Kong. This is like 2019. And it's a bottom-up led protest against authoritarianism, and they start using Pepe, of course, completely divorced from the connotation of what Pepe means in the US.
Mhm.
And there's, what happens is this crazy kind of what always happens on the internet is like, in this contextless environment, people try to take ownership of things. So like far right in the US, we're trying to say like, oh, this is a far right movement in Hong Kong,
Yes.
whether in good faith or bad faith or just ignorance. They obviously wanted to take ownership of it. And Gen Xers or just people kind of understood what this was. Like, no, this is a people's protest. Like the frog means something completely different there. So seeing it come up in these ICE protests feels like very similar to that Hong Kong moment that luckily we
Yeah.
were able to capture.
Totally fascinating. It reminds me also of just the sudden influx of meme readers on top of memes, so that
Yeah.
like after Charlie Kirk's assassination, Tyler Robinson was using that Slav meme, the guy
Gopnik
squatting.
Pepe.
Yes, exactly.
Gopnik Pepe. Yeah.
Gopnik Pepe. And I remember saying, some people wanted this to be a right-wing symbol to get any kind of anarchist off the hook for it right after Charlie Kirk was whatever. We all know these things get complicated. And so reading and rereading that meme became something I, to my shame, joined in on a little bit. But I think that the idea that we are all making meaning of these symbols, that we invest with certain properties, is also a huge part of the internet. Some people are making it and some people are making meaning of it.
Yeah, there's my favorite part of making Feels Good Man was the discovery of John Michael Greer, who's this kind of I don't know what you call him. In the way that there exists outsider artists, he's like an outsider academic. He's
Hmm.
an occultist and a scholar, but he's not like
Oh,
um
yeah.
traditionally read, but he's one of the smartest and most interesting people I know. And he writes a lot about the occult, but he also talked a lot about meme magic, and he's very serious about it. And if you look him up, he's got this incredible long gray beard. He looks like a character out of a Tolkien novel. And we filmed him in his hometown of Providence, Rhode Island, at the Providence
Athenaeum.
Athenaeum. Incredible setting. And he just looks straight to camera and he starts talking deathly seriously about meme magic. And what I love about the interview is that I think like most people's experience of watching the interview is like, oh, this is silly. And then by the end, you're like, oh, I'm totally believe this. And I
Yep,
think
yep.
that the basic idea is that if you focus enough energy around an icon, around a meme, it can create real world change. And this is like what undergirds everything about particularly like right wing fascist movements, I think, over the last 10 years or so, because Q is essentially an extension of that, right? Q is the meme and just sort of the focus on the internet, and then it just kind of folds over into real life. And same with Pepe, that whole crew of kind of 4chan trolls leading up to Trump's first election used Pepe as this kind of bludgeoning tool online to like embarrass and shame normies and Clintonites. And they all believe that they memed Trump into the presidency through meme
Mhm.
magic. So, yeah, big shout out to John Michael Greer. He really actually speaks very eloquently and probably the best about this.
Yeah, I love actually that concept. American folk magic is a type of sympathetic magic. And, we have this from Think and Grow Rich, literally like,
Mm,
prosperity gospel
Mhm.
and the self-help dynamics that have come
Manifesting.
mhm.
manifesting,
Yeah.
all the
The
way up
Secret.
yeah, The Secret and like all the way up to meme magic, which is just another version of the same
Mhm,
idea. Is like you focus enough on some outcome or some methodology and that will somehow manifest itself into reality. And like with these internet platforms, we now have these as like liminal spaces almost, where people are bringing all of that energy and especially that they can't put in other areas of their lives. And we're suddenly seeing this like unconscious, this like space
mhm.
of the unconscious where a lot of these things are finding
Yeah.
symbols, and Pepe is one of those symbols.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask, in the Any Social Network, which is what you directed after Feels Good Man, how did you actually get in touch
Oh
with
yeah.
some of these folks? Because these are not the kind of people who would normally go on the record or on camera. There are people who are hackers for
Mhm.
Anonymous. There are, several of the founders of these platforms appeared on your
Yeah.
documentary and extensive interviews, and then the eventual backers of 8chan, who were interesting people.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of it is just dumb luck, and the other is just dogged research, particularly on the part of Dale Baran, who is one of our producers on the Antisocial Network and a cartoonist and journalist in his own right. Dale was one of our producers and a longtime collaborator. He'd also been a seated interview character in Feels Good Man, and then we became good friends. And he really helped us with the research quite a bit on the Antisocial Network, and he wrote a book called 4chan, The Skeleton Key to the Rise of Trump. So he had been steeped in this world for quite some time. So he had relationships with people like Fred Brennan, the creator of 8chan,
Mhm.
for a while, but other ones were just like, finding data dumps on, God, what are these repositories of like
Mhm.
internet archive stuff? We found an entire archive of this one now defunct YouTube creator who was kind of patient zero for Q.
Oh.
And
Oh,
it's
uh-oh.
just amazing because you could see this kid, and he became a character in the Antisocial Network, and he's in his early 20s, but we found all of his archived YouTube videos from when he was 7 up until 20. So you could see this kid's development as like someone who was born in this internet age of like clickbaity influencer BS. And he starts off as like a Super Mario Brothers influencer, and you can see how he's constantly trying to ride waves
Yeah.
until he's a teenager and gets enthralled with sort of wrapped up in the Trump movement, and then just becomes like one of the earliest QAnon kind of patient zero moments. He has a little bit of a following of like 50,000 people or so, and then the minute he starts posting about Q, the algorithm just it goes off,
Wow.
Mhm.
and he gets sucked into that world. And so, but convincing him just in the functional aspects of it, the question you asked, like, I called him and I was like, hey, we have all your stuff. It's
Right.
super interesting. Which he was shocked by, because like, I thought I deleted all that stuff from
Oh,
YouTube. I was like,
wow.
well, the internet lives forever. We're going to use it in one way or another, but we'd love for you to tell your story. I think it's just going to be much more compelling. And, you just have to build trust with people.
Yeah.
And I'm never one to like, it was very challenging on this, but I never want to approach anyone, whether I'm on their side, so to speak, or not, without telling them or being like perfectly frank about what our motives are, because
Mhm.
you just don't ever end up getting a good interview anyway if there's no
Mhm.
trust there. So I find that like being overly explanatory about your motives ultimately helps, because if people are not fully bought into the idea of being in the film, they're either going to give you a really combative interview that's just not good,
Mhm.
or it's just going to feel really stilted or performative. So luckily it's tended to work out. And the same held true with a lot of the anonymous hackers that are in the film. It was just they felt that enough time had passed that they felt legally safe to talk about things, but
Mhm.
Mhm.
also that they wanted to tell their story. And yeah, I just appreciate it very much that they entrusted in us the opportunity to tell that story.
Really also you caught them at a time where they were feeling remorse.
Hmm.
And, they wanted to have a father confessor in you, be able to atone in some ways or at least extenuate what they had done. We have a lot of whistleblowers now in the media from the first Trump term. I think of like Lev Parnas or
Hmm.
people that were in his circle, Michael Cohen and Olivia Troy, who worked for them and are now on the other side and can not only talk about how the sausage is made, but can talk about it in this incredibly frank way because they want to come clean. And I thought that was great that you got that in these figures. And from the very beginning, I think the first voice, one of the first voices in the Antisocial Network is the guy who's like, "Now I want to make this right," or something like that. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and to for those who haven't seen the film, basically, I think what they've held guilt for, these are like early 4chaners, people who kind of invented the way that we talk on the internet and relate. I think it's commonly understood to be the case now, but like when it started, none of these people knew where things were headed, and if most of them were teenagers when it all started. So what they're trying to atone for is like the idea that they kind of set into motion a kind of shitpost culture that turned into QAnon, that turned into basically like the unraveling of reality and creating the machinery for that, of how to warp reality through the internet. And of course, they couldn't see that coming, but all the same, they feel guilty about it. But you see it happening, yeah, over and over again. The stories are folding over on each other now too with the Epstein release, because of course, related to this story, it turns out that Epstein met with Christopher Poole, who went by the name Moot, who's the creator of 4chan, who would not be in our film and did not respond to many inquiries. But so that was wild to see. But then, ironically, it seems as though Epstein in the emails was very interested in hiring hackers for a long time, and might have ended up hiring this guy who went by Sabu. And I know this is very in the weeds for people, but I promise it's more interesting than it sounds. But Sabu was essentially the hacker who was loathed by everyone from the original anonymous world, because he was working as an informant for the FBI and got everyone arrested, including one of the people featured in our film. And so it was wild to see in these emails that Jeffrey Epstein knew who Sabu was and said, "Let's hire this guy." It's like you can kind of see how clueless. Anyway, we could talk about it if you want. His relationship to what hackers are and what they do
yeah.
throughout these emails is hysterical. But sorry, I just drifted off into another
No, I
world.
was I was going to get into
Epstein
that
was
with you.
next.
So,
Yeah.
we recently learned with the new drop of the DOJ documents that Epstein actually did meet with 4chan's founder Chris Poole, and I had, created something that you then reached out to me about, considering that, like, are these narratives that most of the folks who are in these spaces considered to be homegrown
Mm,
and sort of like these homebrewed, authentic rejections of like dominant narratives, the dominant culture, were actually very much a part of the awareness of these elite actors, including the very people that they were spinning their own stories about. And
mm-hmm,
so Epstein and Steve Bannon, of course, and other folks of that ilk were like very much aware of and invested in the outcomes of these narratives. And so when you're talking about like how Epstein maybe wanted to hire hackers, like, did you come across anything that says exactly how he thought this whole world worked, or how he wanted to use them?
I mean, more broadly, when you read through the Epstein emails, and the thing that strikes me first is like this guy was a big dum dum. just a big,
Yes.
big dum-dum.
Oh,
And
and
he's
Virginia and I've had endless conversations
I
about
actually I feel that I have very good proof that he couldn't read or write. And he actually, I mean, just couldn't read or write. Like if he was your 10-year-old, you would be very, very, very concerned and he would need a lot of coaching.
but
Like just cognitively damaged or, withered or something in a serious way, which is like he says actually not being to Bannon. I don't know if you saw this, but that we've made a mistake in teaching kids to write because people like him, Socrates, and Bannon proposes Jesus Christ can't write and are thus better thinkers. Just putting that out there. Anyway, yes, we
there's,
are agreed he's a dum-dum. So what
yeah,
about the
but the
tell us
hackers,
about the dumbness.
the hacker thread, because of course there's millions of files, but if you want to see the scale of his dumb-dumbness, the hacker thing is really funny, at least in my reading of it. You start to see that as early as 2009, which is kind of the peak of this first wave of anonymous that springs out of the Arab Spring movement and then Occupy Wall Street, the anonymous hacker collective kind of becomes part of the cultural conversation as these kinds of online Robin Hoods who are like stealing from the rich. In this one email that Epstein has, he's writing to someone that's redacted. He's like, I think I understand how to get limitless energy. It's all biology and hacking. And like his whole point is that basically he can create a limitless energy machine through hacking biology, because biology is just about code. And therefore we should find a hacker from Anonymous to help. And it's just like, and then the response is like, oh, okay, yeah, let me see if I can find this person. And, just so you know, like these are not the most approachable people. And you just see that in his orbit are just, it's just like it is the story that we are seeped in now, which is that our world is controlled by a bunch of man babies who are surrounded by yes men and women. And they're actually masking how deeply curious and stupid they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, that's the platform logic as well as, the individual narrative logic. It's like, Virginia and I were talking a bit about like how some of these products like 4chan, like, Facebook, like, where people behind the scenes are making these decisions to actually push features that are going to make things actively worse or bend reality even further, or, yeah, you were gonna
but
say.
that's the thing, is that I think the initial impulse when they saw the connection between Epstein and Chris Poole was like, oh, Epstein was Q. And it's like, well, first of all, you have to understand
Okay,
something.
yeah.
Is like, you can't plan anything on the internet. So this idea that you could
Right.
orchestrate Q and make it happen is insane. And I think if you watch the Antisocial Network, you'll see the beautiful stupidity of the internet and how unpredictable it is. And if you see Epstein and his arc with the idea of hackers, you'll see just how unvarnished his stupidity is. Because like it starts off, just to keep it concise, like his first interest starts in 2009, and it's really about this energy idea he has and how hackers can hack biology the same way they hack websites. I don't know. And then the next phase, he wants to hire hackers, presumably it looks like to clean the internet of his bad press. This happens in like 2012. And so it's after his first arrest, and you can see that he's having probably issues with people looking him up on the internet. And so again, not understanding how the internet works, he's asking his assistant, like, hire these people. And she's like, well, again, like they might not want to work for you. So how are we going to hire them? And it's quite interestingly, he sounds like he sets up this BS science foundation to give people grants.
Yeah.
And then the third wave, of course, of his interest in hackers is just seems to be about creating some kind of cryptocurrency type bullshit. So it's always haphazard and always starting from a place of complete ignorance about what hackers are and how they work. So,
and how do they respond to him?
Well, Chris Poole, the 4chan founder, from all the emails, it seems like they did meet once, and it seems like it was brief. And I think subsequently,
which, by the way, for moot is a freaking lot.
It is, yeah. Because yes. Yes. But he seems to ignore him there then on out. Like they try to set up another second meeting, but for months he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it," and "Oh, how about tomorrow?" And it's just one after the other, and then they kind of all give up. Which was my experience trying to wrangle a lot of people.
But I just want to go to the one meeting, and also Epstein being a dum-dum, which is like my friend Matt Schwartz of the New York Times was able to do one interview with Chris Poole with Moot, and it's one of the hardest things he's ever done. And this is a guy who's interviewed Paul Manafort, and so it is very hard to get an interview with this guy. And it seems significant that Epstein somehow, because the mystery of Epstein is how he captivated so many people from so many different domains, right?
Mhm.
And so we're always trying to figure that out. What did he, is your guess that he offered, Mood $1 million for an hour-long conversation, or what did he do? Because we
I
saw him try to strong arm a lot of people, and most people gave into it. A couple people, the head of Hermes, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, rebuffed him, but Moot didn't. And so what do you think he offered him?
I mean, I think it's worth putting yourself in his shoes at that time. It's like 2011. It's kind of peak of this, we call like the hoodie era of
Mm,
founders. Chris Poole is like, I don't know, in his mid-20s. He's got
mhm,
this website that's the most popular website on the internet, but also doesn't make any money because there's no advertiser that would ever go near it. So he's in this precarious situation where he kind of is running this website that isn't worth anything, and he's trying to spin off new ideas. So my sense is that he probably took a meeting. He was taking meetings with dumb
mhm,
money and seeing what he could
mhm,
get. And
mhm,
he's a solo operator. I'm sure he had no idea who he was meeting,
mhm.
and he was young. And I don't imagine that there was any ill intent in that meeting.
Got it.
Mood has
Yep.
subsequently, actually, to his credit, made a public statement about it. So I tend to agree with him. But what
Mhm,
I would say, yeah, their awareness of 4chan, I think, was really
mhm,
about its ability to disrupt reality. And so I think they were fascinated by
mhm,
that machinery.
mhm,
And certainly Bannon on record said many times that we had to we, meaning their team, had to figure out how to coalesce the 4chan people to bring Trump to power. And to
mhm.
his credit, he kind of did do that. But it's all also by kind of dumb luck, I think, too. It's just,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I like the way you focus on in both films on contingency of these things, because what's lost a little bit, although you do a great job explaining it, is that memes is the cultural counterpart to genes, right? In Richard Dawkins's account of what memes are, and a small unit of culture. And even though we lean into natural selection as the phenomenon of how genes and memes develop, there's also the spontaneous mutation. And that's a lot of what I feel like you're describing, which is that in Feels Good Man, we see the spontaneous mutation of that could never have been predicted through this nonlinear path of this one meme. And similarly, there are all these random contingencies, and our brain wants to make them a conspiracy, but they're not quite. So Bannon, who seems like a great mastermind now, was like part of the World of Warcraft scam to get Chinese people mining gold. God help
yeah.
us if we try to understand it. At the same time, it's quite understandable in retrospect that he fell into understanding Gamergate and the rage of young men on the one hand, and also the possibility of symbolic gold serving as tradable as actual gold, i.e., crypto. So, I thought Bannon was an idiot when he first came to my consciousness, which it wasn't until 2016, if you can believe it. I hadn't followed the Tea Party, but there, truckloads of books about the rise of the right in plain view, and what you've done is talk about the rise of the right, kind of s I'm thinking of it as like sub rosa or like the demi-monde,
Mhm.
like down here. There's
Yeah.
this
Like,
Mhm.
other story of how the right came up, and it has these data points that you started with, like Reddit, and it has Gamergate, and it has this other story that has nothing to do with Bannon's time at Goldman Sachs, Bannon's time at Harvard
Mhm.
Business School. It's a different
Yeah,
story,
the
and it's a
Claremont Institute. Yeah.
the
yeah.
Claremont Institute, right? And the Trilateral Commission. It
Right.
doesn't have to do with the data points of old conspiracy theories. It has to do with a different set of contingencies. And it takes a documentary rather than a, board with red string to explain that as a narrative. And I just think that's great. I haven't seen, is it called Into the Storm, the other documentary about
Mm,
QAnon?
mm.
I like that a lot, but it's a more traditional what form of storytelling.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting you brought that up, because what I was going to say is that, well, it's two things. It's like, I don't want to give too much power to these people, but at the same
Mm,
time, I don't want to discount, like when I say Epstein is a dum dum, it also he was a monster, so
Mhm.
obviously, but I think what he really excelled at and what gave him power was this, and what a lot of these figures like Bannon too have, is this ability to kind of read people, and Epstein seemed uniquely good at making really smart dorks feel cool.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
emails, when you read them, he kind of clearly has a kind of dumb dumb complex, and being around these smart people makes him feel smart, and so he overcompensates.
Mhm.
So anyway, just to kind of qualify all that, like that unique, as unintelligent he was, his emotional intelligence and figuring out how to like befriend these people, just it's this horrible symbiotic thing. And
Mhm.
related to that, I would say like not to give them too much power. I think just as much to blame are the way that we respond to it. And so like Q into the Storm was certainly like an amazing insight into the deep sanctum of like how the people who were at the end controlling QAnon. It's very weird father son duo.
Right.
But it also
This is
like
Jim and Ron Watkins,
Ron
and
Watkins,
sometimes
yes.
I feel like it's like it's sort of past the moment where it was like, "Who is Q? Who is Q? Who is Q?"
Yeah.
Then that movie comes out, shows you who Q is, and people go back to the excitement of wondering who Q is. Like, they just,
Y-
it people sort of blew past the possibility that it was this guy who anyway, that was a
Yeah.
very interesting moment in it.
But
Um
it's just the way that, I guess my point was to say that like to not give them enough power, and I think to give us some agency, and this is kind of why we make these films, is to hopefully give people agency in navigating this insane world and make them kind of understand the stupidity. You know, you don't have to understand all the minutia because it is
Mhm.
almost unintelligible, but if you can understand that it's way stupider than you think it is, it suddenly gives you some agency
Mhm.
in all that. But is to say that like the response to all this, I think, has been really poor, starting with Trump's first run and the way that memes and Pepe were used, the way that the Clinton campaign responded, her basket of deplorables comment. Like there are all these examples of just how normies, or kind of mainstream media as well, just still to this day kind of haven't figured out how to engage with bad faith trolls. There's
Mm.
always this compulsion of sort of like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football to extend good faith to people who absolutely don't deserve it. And I
Mm.
don't know how, and it's happening again with this. Sorry to bring him up again. I'm just fascinated now
Yeah.
with this clavicular guy. It's like
Oh,
this
yeah.
dude is just regurgitating like 15-year-old memes. Stop taking the bait. Stop taking the
Oh,
bait.
come on, Giorgio, he's a Chad. You're just
Oh
jealous.
yeah,
The guy's a
exactly.
Chad.
Yeah, I
I
need some
d
work done
don't
here.
worry, Si and I think about clavicular a little too much also.
I
Um,
think a really interesting take on him lately that I agree with is that he's actually regurgitating a lot of the same like logic and the same aesthetics that happen in gay culture, but without the gay. So it's like the circuit
yes.
parties, and but that sort of sexual energy is then like transmuted into the actual act that all of that is pointed to in gay culture. But when you don't have that release, then it gets channeled into violence. And so there's a
Mm,
lot of that with the looks maxing pipeline, where it's like if you don't have, because if you hate women and all of this is looking good to spite women,
right.
then where does that energy go? It gets channeled into really, really destructive stuff. And so
Yeah.
it's like almost creating these cultural cul-de-sacs that like just bottle things up even further.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with Giorgio, like when like you've actually talked to the folks living in their parents' basement, you've like talked to the folks who are active in these movements, like is there any form of like actual solidarity or resistance or meaning making that was like even
Mhm.
emerging out of this, or is it really just a place to put all of the nasties that you cannot take anywhere else because you can't sublimate it?
Yep.
I mean, I think the first wave of anonymous, there really was
Yeah.
a defined political movement. Of course, there were factions within it, but I think there was a very clear bottom up, us versus them, kind of take the machine down, that was authentic people's rights movement that has now been co-opted into something that is just, yeah, the very nature of internet culture, which is just straight opportunism, whatever can coalesce clicks and attention. And I mean, with the case of clavicular, like he's kind of reducing it to its essence, right? Because in Feels Good Man, we spend time with this guy who went by Eggman, who in some way is like, to extend the metaphor, I guess, is like the egg that bore clavicular. But he is very much. I don't think he would take offense to me saying this because he certainly said worse things about himself. But he's not the most handsome dude in the world.
Yeah.
I will say he was really funny, and it was really tough being around him because you could see, like, oh man, if you just if I could spend time with you, if I, could care enough, there's a smart, caring person in here that's just being,
Mm.
Right.
kept down. But he kind of is the person somewhat credited with creating like the black pill idea, this idea of
Yeah.
just like
Mhm.
Yeah.
dropping out and being nihilistic. But he had like very, as maddeningly evasive as he had a political ideology, and it was bad. It was really
Ah,
bad, and it was
yeah.
racist and anti-Semitic. But like you see, Clavicular takes that, and he's like, okay, the aesthetics of black pillism and sort of looks maxing and like being obsessed with your face gets you a lot of attention, but and sort of the politics, but the politics kind of don't matter. I'm just going to take what's useful. It's kind of the analogy is like 4chan to Facebook, right? Like 4chan
Mm.
can never make money because it could never parse the aesthetics of fascism. Like it could never separate the message and the aesthetic. So it could
Mm.
never
I
Mhm.
get
see.
the
Yeah.
advertising. Whereas Facebook was like, oh no, we'll push the same idea, but we'll just give it a different veneer. And like
Mm.
clavicular to me is kind of the same on a creator or like a
So, I
influencer
mean,
level. Yeah.
that was his it's interesting. My son is a animal welfare activist, and he's just a tall, lanky, very thin kid. And when he does tabling for veganism, he noticed that his like fellow activist is a big guy, big shoulders, and he noticed that he managed to make more vegan converts than Ben did. So he is a little bit in the gym bulking up his shoulders so that he looks better at the table, so people will think veganism or realize veganism is better for your health. It's just a small thing. It seems pretty harmless, but that's the same thing that drove Clavicular. You may remember his story is that he found himself wanting to persuade people of his political views. I don't even know what those views were. I assume they were right wing, but who knows? And he couldn't do it, and he realized that he needed the authority of, like, an Obama or someone with charisma in order to be more persuasive, and that led him to this other thing, and now he, as you say, does just that. He no longer is waiting to deliver the content. He is
It,
the message.
He's the
he's
But
the most,
container
it's
with
just
no
the
content.
aesthetics. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's completely
yeah,
uninteresting, has nothing interesting to say. It's
yeah,
literally just the aesthetics. And there's something kind of pure about it that I appreciate, but I just hope
yeah.
that,
Well, look,
yeah.
I think that we are an important thing about clavicular, in addition to all the other extremely important things about clavicular that we'll work on in our long postdoc that we do on him, but is that he's rotting inside, right? And so like his body is now wrecked. So just at the point that I, anyway, at my advanced age, am paying attention to clavicular, it's kind of like the end of clavicular. He takes a lot of speed, obviously, like RFK Jr. takes human growth hormone and other things that like really wear out your body. Even he has said that, this number of drugs and this kind of treatment of his body is like, it maybe it makes him look good and healthy, but he's not good and healthy. And I also want to pick up on something Sai said. So it seems at least possible that we are behind in our description of what's going on in like the dark web or whatever it is now. The thing that I hear, and this is where it comes to Sai, the thing that I hear in the response to clavicular, like our response, or the response of gay men on TikTok, picking up on this is the circuit parties, this is the too much time in the gym, this is the flexing for each other, we recognize this, is that the spirit of the times is with them or the victims of Jeffrey Epstein or of trafficking or former sex workers online saying, let me parse this for you guys. I've been waiting my whole life to explain to you how this goes down. Or people in finance who say, I was trying to do corporate responsibility back then. This is how financialization has worked with Jeffrey Epstein, and this is how we can explain it. Those people seem to be the leading edge of the conversation. In some ways, we're out of the particular weeds where clavicular was commanding the attention just of young men, or where incels were, where Elliot Rodgers was the hero and not sitting in jail, or where Jeffrey Epstein had all those friends and was not hanged and jailed. And so what I wonder about, in the spirit of picking up the pieces of of this broken internet, is where do you see signs of life for what might come next?
Ugh. The signs of life, the signals are there. I think, for example, if you told me a year ago that a plurality of Americans would be in favor of eliminating ICE entirely, I wouldn't have believed you. So I think we're in a moment now where like the utter rot and decay of that's undergirding society is so on display that even the normies are getting it. And I think that's always been the issue, right? It's like it's getting the normies to get it, and like they have not gotten it, I guess. And up until now, maybe, like I was saying earlier, their response to Trump 2016 campaign and trolling was really bad. The way that the New York Times and people are engaging with clavicular, it's bad. But I think as a society, I'm starting to see a kind of awakening within the middle, and a kind of awareness or feeling safe to kind of be like, wait, yeah, maybe policing isn't actually great. Maybe all these things that I've taken for granted or just assumed were good are actually maybe my lefty friends were right or whatever. I think there's hope there, and I think like I hope I have two sons, 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I really do worry a lot about what their experience of the internet will be, and so I'm starting. Unfortunately, I'd really dipped out of this world for a few years since making Antisocial Network, and now getting back into it because I have sons and because of people like Clavicular. So that is not hopeful, but I just hope it just burns out. I hope that kids understand how unbelievably dorky it is to like hold up content creators as like heroes. Like these are the most,
Yeah.
I mean, no offense, but like they have nothing to offer. It is just,
Yeah.
it is like the purest form of the commoditization of the internet. Like there's nothing there except for the aesthetic. And like,
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that, I don't know. Sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place. The other hopeful thing to that end, though, is that punk rock is back. As a longtime
Yes.
musician, seeing kids, my kid is also in a rock band class thing. And it's really been heartening to see that kids are literally picking up guitars again. And I think that's a good thing, a really good thing.
Absolutely. My daughter is this way too. She has a band called Modge Podge that covers the
Hell yeah.
Lemonheads, and the Lemonheads have,
Oh,
have
wow.
like forwarded her Instagram or whatever. They love her, and a regular day for her is I've got band practice, and then we're going down to the protest, the ICE protest, and she's
Yeah.
16. I would never have remotely like go down to the protest. Just seemed like the worst possible thing you could, like some sad hippies were,
Cringe. Yeah.
right,
Cringe, yeah.
absolutely cringe. And now it seems, pretty pro forma. Like there are walkouts in schools, and the aesthetic it looks very rough. It looks very anti-influencer. We're seeing
Mm.
a lot of influence the same way clavicular's rotting. We're seeing a set piece by influencers saying this has destroyed my mental health and I've got to leave.
To
Um,
to put a
yeah.
button on it, it's something I've said in the past about this work. It's like the story Feels Good Man and the Antisocial Network is really a story about how the internet and social media websites and the culture itself has like worked against you to shame you out of your compassion. It has made you
Yes.
feel like uh, a loser for giving a shit about other people and other people's problems. And so the hope that I'm seeing now is that like for the first time, it is not cringe, quote unquote, to give a shit. And that is very heartening to me. And I think the energy is behind that side, and the clavicular is, I think, is descendant. So that's my hope.
And that's
I have the
absolutely,
same one. Yeah, where it's because clavicular and all that he sort of stands for is that simulacrum, right? It's
Mhm.
like something that has lost its referent. Like there's nothing under it. It's pure
Exactly.
surface. And you just
Mhm.
the way he taps his cheekbones with a hammer, it's like you tap that and it shatters. There's nothing there.
Mhm.
And I do think you're exactly right, where it's like we have been shamed and cajoled and trolled out of our humanity in many cases, because to have any type of humanity is to be vulnerable. And being
Mhm.
vulnerable is exactly what so many of us have been, you know, lured out of, I guess. I mean,
Mhm.
because there was no system that we're a part of cares at all about whether we live or die.
Mhm.
And I think that's the flip side of what we've seen in these internet spaces for so long. It's like, where do we go to put that energy? The only way the only place we can go is in these dark spaces.
Mhm.
So hopefully you're right. Like we are starting to see those bubbles on the surface, those green shoots of people actually caring about things again.
Yeah.
Mm.
I re
Amen.
I really, really believe that. I'm not just trying for a soft landing to the episode.
No, I agree too.
I really do. And
Well, we
just
have to
for
meme
listeners.
magic. Even if we don't believe it, we have to meme magic it into reality, right?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
that's why, I mean, there's a beautiful ending to Feels Good Man where you see
Mhm.
you see him with like his young daughter. I mean, he's an incredibly tender person and playing with a little tiny frog. That's like that image is just so great at the beginning of the film. That and all along he's been like, this should be a symbol of love. And then you see it as a symbol of fun and resistance out in Portland and opposing ICE, and other places too. And it definitely cringe, right? To be like, let's make it for love, right?
Yeah,
But
to his
sorry, maybe
line.
love's what's next. You heard it here first.
Yeah, well, that's what he says. His closing line is like, it's all about, being hardcore happiness, like hardcore happy. And when we were editing the film, like when we saw we was putting together the ending, just the way that our amazing editor, Aaron Wickenden, put it together. Like when you hear Matt say just hardcore happiness, it, I might start crying now. Like he was carrying so much weight and grief over the loss of his cartoon character being sucked into this horrible world. And in that moment, I could tell that he was trying to convince himself of it too, because if you
Mhm.
don't, you have to believe it, because the alternative is utter despair. The
Yeah.
alternative is black pill, and like the alternative is fascism. And it's just, that's it, what it preys on. And so, yeah, my message is just hardcore happiness, whether you believe it
Let's
or
leave
not.
it there.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful ending. Giorgio, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for having
much.
me.
It
This
was
is
really
such a
wonderful
pleasure.
to talk to you.
Likewise.
That's it for today's show. This episode of What Rough Beast was brought to you by Cy Cantarell and me, Virginia Heffernan. It was produced by Richard Stanislaw and Brianna Snyder. John Jeremiah Sullivan recorded our theme song, Je dis ce que je pense et je vis comme je veux, which was originally written and recorded by the French pop star Antoine. You can subscribe to the show at whatroughbeastpod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Virginia Heffernan on behalf of Cy Cantarell and the What Rough Beast team. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time on What Rough Beast.
Oh yeah. Is there a video of?
That's my new
Yes,
obsession.
there is going to be
there's
video. Sorry.
Yeah.
I should have told you
All
that.
Okay, hold on. Let me get the angles right. It would be very silly to have a filmmaker on this podcast with bad lighting and bad angles.